There are 4 things a person should never reveal too early. Not because the world is cruel, although it often is, but because certain things lose their power the moment they are spoken. They get weakened by exposure, diluted by attention, contaminated by the opinions of people who were never meant to be part of the process. Most people think that silence is the absence of something, that it means you have nothing to say. But silence, real silence, the kind Jung wrote about, is not empty. It is full. It is a container. And what you place inside that container either grows in the dark or dies in the light. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly what to protect, why your words have been working against you, and you will never speak so carelessly again. Never reveal your plans while they are still forming. Jung once wrote that every desire, if spoken too soon, loses the energy required for its own realization. He called this energy libido, not in the sexual sense, but as the raw psychic fuel that drives all creation, all ambition, all becoming. When you tell someone your plan, when you describe the business you want to build, the move you want to make, the life you are quietly constructing, something happens inside you that you don't immediately notice. The pressure drops. The tension that was supposed to push you into action escapes through your mouth. You feel relief, and you mistake that relief for progress. But nothing has changed. You have not moved. You have not built. You have not risked anything. You have only performed the idea of movement, and your psyche, unable to distinguish between real action and the simulation of it, quietly withdraws its investment. A man I once knew, an engineer in his early 50s, the kind who always carried a notebook in his coat pocket, spent 2 years telling everyone about the book he was going to write. He described the chapters at dinner parties. He explained the thesis to colleagues over coffee. He even told strangers about it on trains. And every time he spoke, his eyes lit up as if the book already existed. But it didn't, and it never would. Because every conversation gave him the emotional reward of completion without a single page being written. There is a reason the ancients worked in silence, not because they feared judgment, because they understood that a plan is a seed, and seeds do not grow under spotlights. They grow in soil, in darkness, in containment. Protect the pressure. It is the only thing that will push you from thinking into doing. Think right now about the last goal you announced publicly, the one you told your friends about, maybe posted about, maybe even celebrated before it was real. How long did your motivation last after that? Be honest with yourself. If it faded, now you know why. Never reveal your fears to those who have not earned your trust. There is a difference between processing your pain and broadcasting it. Jung understood that the shadow, the unconscious part of yourself that holds your shame, your fear, your unspoken wounds, needs to be confronted. But confronted does not mean confessed to everyone who will listen. The shadow is not healed by exposure. It is healed by integration. And integration requires a sacred space, not a public stage. When you reveal your deepest fears to someone who has not earned that level of access, you are not unburdening yourself. You are handing them a map to your weakest points, not because they are necessarily malicious, though some are, but because fear, once spoken carelessly, changes the way people see you. It becomes a lens, and everything you do from that point forward gets filtered through it.
A woman I knew, sharp, ambitious, building something real, made the mistake of telling a group of friends about her fear of abandonment. She said it casually over wine on a Friday evening, as if naming it would loosen its grip. But the opposite happened.
Within weeks, she noticed a shift. The same friends who had once encouraged her independence began treating her as fragile. They softened their voices around her. They avoided confrontation. They held back honest feedback. And slowly, without realizing it, she began to inhabit the role they had assigned her. Her fear didn't shrink. It spread, like something contagious, from her inner world into her relationships, into her identity, into the way she walked into rooms. This is what Jung called projection, but in reverse. She projected her wound outward, and the world reflected it back to her, magnified and permanent. Not every ear deserves your truth. Some people hold your pain with care. Others feed on it without knowing. And a few, the most dangerous ones, will store it quietly and return it to you at the exact moment you are weakest. Before you speak your fear, ask one question. Has this person ever held something fragile of mine and returned it unbroken? If the answer is no, your silence is not avoidance. It is wisdom. Let me say something that might disturb you. Most of the people you confide in are not carrying your pain for you. They are absorbing it into their perception of who you are. And once that perception is set, you will spend years trying to outgrow a version of yourself that someone else refuses to release. Never reveal your inner transformation while it is still in process. This one is subtle, and most people miss it entirely. When you begin to change, truly change, not the surface-level adjustments, but the deep, tectonic shifts that happen when you confront your shadow, dismantle old patterns, rebuild yourself from the inside, there is an almost unbearable urge to talk about it, to announce it, to say, "I am not who I was." Resist that urge. Jung called the process of becoming whole individuation, and he was very clear. Individuation is not a performance. It is an interior journey, and it is fragile in its early stages. The way a bone is weakest precisely at the point where it is healing. The moment you tell people you are changing, you invite two forms of resistance. The first comes from those who are comfortable with the old version of you. They do not want you to change, because your transformation quietly threatens theirs. They will question your motives. They will remind you of who you used to be. They will say things like, "This isn't really you," as if they hold the copyright to your identity. The second resistance is more dangerous because it comes from within. When you announce your transformation, you create an audience. And once there is an audience, the process shifts from internal truth to external performance. You stop changing because it is necessary and start performing change because it is expected. The ego hijacks the journey, and what began as genuine growth becomes theater. I watched this happen to a man who discovered meditation, therapy, and solitude all within the same year. It was the most important year of his life, and he nearly destroyed it by documenting every step online. Every insight became a post, every breakthrough became a caption, and slowly, the practice lost its depth. He was no longer sitting in silence for himself. He was sitting in silence for the version of himself that strangers had begun to admire.
The inner work became outer content, and the transformation stalled, right at the point where it mattered most. Let the change settle into your bones before you give it a name. Let people notice the difference rather than hear about it. The most powerful transformations are the ones that are visible, but never explained. Never reveal what you are quietly leaving behind. When you decide to leave, a relationship, a career, a friendship, a version of yourself that no longer fits, something in you wants to explain, wants to justify.
Wants to deliver a closing monologue so the world understands. This is the ego's final negotiation with the life it is departing. If I cannot stay, at least let me be understood. But that need to be understood is a trap. It is gravity, the pull of the old world trying to hold you in orbit. Every explanation you offer becomes a thread that ties you to what you are leaving. Every justification opens a door for someone to argue you back. Every announcement gives the environment time to reorganize itself around keeping you exactly where you are. You see this constantly on social media, people posting long emotional explanations about why they are leaving a platform, a community, a relationship. Paragraphs of reasoning, public farewells, and then, weeks later, they are still there. The announcement absorbed the energy that was meant for the departure. The words replaced the walking. The exit became a conversation instead of a movement. A woman I knew spent 3 months telling her colleagues she was going to leave her career in finance. She explained her reasons at every lunch break. She described her frustrations in careful detail. And each time she spoke, they responded with sympathy, with counterarguments, with subtle guilt. By the time she was finally ready to act, her certainty had been dismantled piece by piece. She stayed another 4 years. Now contrast that with someone else, a quiet man who worked in the same company. One Monday morning, his desk was empty. No farewell email, no dramatic announcement, no explanation. He had simply moved on, and because there was nothing to argue with, no narrative to dismantle, his departure was clean, complete, irreversible. The things you leave should be left in silence, not because you owe no one an explanation, but because the explanation is the chain. If you are watching this and you already know what you need to leave, stop explaining it to people who are invested in the old arrangement of your life. They will not give you permission. They will give you reasons to stay. Leave first. Explain never. So where does this leave you? Not in paranoia, not in isolation. Silence is not about building walls. It is about building containers strong enough to hold what matters, until it is ready to exist in the world on its own terms. Jung wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But becoming requires protection. It requires discernment, knowing not just what to say, but what to withhold. Not from fear, from power. Tonight, before you speak to anyone, ask yourself 4 questions. Am I sharing this because it is ready, or because I need validation? Am I describing this to move forward, or to feel as though I already have? Am I offering this to someone who has earned the weight of it? Am I explaining my departure, or still negotiating with my desire to stay? Write before you speak. Sit before you explain. Build before you announce.
and leave before you are talked out of it. The world will not protect what you reveal too early. That is your responsibility. And it begins with the discipline of the closed mouth. This is Can Still Go. In the next video, we go deeper into one of the most misunderstood ideas in Jungian psychology, the difference between suppression and containment. Most people confuse them, and that confusion costs them everything. Subscribe so you don't miss it.